Hey Tom, how are you?
Yes, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. It was so good to see you a few weeks ago at the Sales Innovation Expo.
Yes, real life. Seeing people in real life, it was like LinkedIn had come to life. So I was on a real high that day, getting to meet lots of connections and making new friends, and great to see you, of course.
Yeah, it was. How did you find the event overall?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, like I say, a little bit overwhelming. Just the size and scale, right? Not just of the event, of the venue, like even just getting to the venue and kind of feeling like, oh, I'm not in the north of England any anymore. But really enjoyed it and really enjoyed speaking. But like I say, favorite parts were just speaking to people who'd maybe seen some content or enjoyed some of the things that have kind of gone out this year. So really
Yeah,
liked that kind of in person. You can't beat an in person event, can you?
you can't beat an in-person event. Even the talks, like I join a lot of webinars and listen to a lot of podcasts, but actually listening to a talk or a panel or fireside chat, there's nothing like seeing that in person, is there?
That's
Um,
right.
but anyway, that gave me an opportunity to see you and to ask you to come and join. So I've been really excited for this conversation. And I know you've got a big fan base out there on LinkedIn. So looking forward to getting into some of the things that you talk about and some of the things that are top of mind for SDRs and leaders. But this is probably going to be a small portion of people. But for people who don't know you, I'd love if you could share a bit of a background about who you are and what you do.
Well, you say small portion, but I was on stage, like you said, a couple of weeks ago, and about two-thirds of the audience didn't have a clue who I was. So it's always good to remain humble. But for those who don't know who I am, my name is Tom Boston. I'm the brand awareness manager at Salesloft. We are a sales engagement platform helping SDRs, AEs, CS teams to hit their targets. My role specifically sees me creating humorous, if I do say so myself, content on LinkedIn, and it's a real passion of mine to encourage others to build their personal brands as well.
Amazing, amazing. I do. It's not just you that says so. I think everyone would agree. The humour that you have in your content. You've got a particularly interesting journey, Tom. I know when I first met you, you were an SDR and one of the first people in Salesloft Europe. And I remember coming to your offices, and it was a small team. So you started as an SDR and kind of founding member of the European team, and you're now predominantly focused on building content. That's not a particularly common journey that we see SDRs take. So, what was it about that role that you've ended up in now that was particularly appealing to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a real passion of mine, like creating, and even before joining the world of SaaS, right? I'd kind of dabbled in all sorts of things, right? Had a blog at one point which nobody read. Had a YouTube channel which nobody watched. So I'd kind of tried all these really creative things because I just enjoyed creating content. And then when I joined Salesloft, as you said there, really small team, brand new to Europe, boots on the ground, and we were tasked with making some noise about the launch of Salesloft. This is 2019, right? Our
Yeah.
London office opens. And it was that light bulb moment where I kind of thought, oh, maybe I could take all of the things I failed at in the past, like content creation, video, writing articles, all those things that didn't really work. And I could maybe bring them into this new role, right? It felt like it made sense. I was an SDR. The very first step on the cadence was inviting people to look at my LinkedIn profile because it was a LinkedIn connection request. And there was nothing really on my profile that was about sales or sales loft or how we could help. So I knew that I had to fill it with content. And then it all kind of went from there, right? It kind of probably did a little bit better than I thought it would, especially when I started leaning into humor and telling the story of kind of what salespeople are going through. And then when it came to look at my next role at Salesloft, it was almost like a no brainer, right? Let's lean into that content. side of things, because Tom's obviously got a real passion for creating. So that's kind of how it went.
Amazing. I'm sure lots of people are going to be keen to hear how it actually happened. But I think with that, before maybe you officially went into this role, you did a really good job at building a personal brand. And we've had Jack Nico on here who's done a similar thing. I know Charlotte Johnson at Salesloft has done a similar thing. Is that something that Salesloft encourages you to do, or how much of that is you guys deciding that that's the route you're going to take?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it almost felt like I say, when I joined, there was 10 of us, and we literally got told to bang the drum, like let's
Yeah.
celebrate that we're here in Europe. And then as other people joined, it just became like a thing. Like that's what we do here, right? We build our personal brands, and we build our profiles, and we kind of tell the story of how we can help, but also we tell our personal stories. And we're really big believers in um, you know sellers being human, and our employees at Salesloft having a voice. So it kind of just happened naturally. But I'd like to say that, yeah, myself and maybe Jack Nico got the ball rolling, right, as being some of the early members of the team.
The OGs for sure. So a lot of people on LinkedIn who do have a good personal brand, always encouraging people like there's no time to start posting like the present, and it's really easy to get started, and it's becoming more and more important to kind of be this trusted advisor. How do people actually get started, and what are some of their tips that you would have for maybe an SDR in an organization to do that?
Yeah, well, it is really easy to get started. It's almost too easy, because you can just jump into content creation right now, right? You could just go write a post, and you could go, right, I'm going to do that every day, every afternoon. I'm just going to write something. But actually, my top tip is to always take a step back a little bit, right? And start to think about, well, what do I want to be talking about on the platform, right? Posting for the sake of it's not necessarily the best strategy for salespeople. It's actually more important to understand, okay, yeah, this is what I want my voice to be. This is my reason for posting. I talk a lot about a mission statement, which is, yeah, what's my why? What's my reason? And also, you want to think about, well, why would somebody follow or engage? And
Mm,
it's usually when you create content which other people can relate to or reflect on, or it sparks something in them. So I used those two examples earlier, writing about food blogs and creating a YouTube channel. They were all about me, right? They were
yeah,
really, really focused on me and who I am. And it was a huge learning curve for me. And when I joined Salesloft and I started making LinkedIn content, I thought, no, it's not about me. It's about
yeah,
them. It's about the audience. So yeah, a couple of tips really. Reflect on what you want your voice to be and what you want your brand to be. Sellers like everything now,
mm,
that's just the nature of what we're what we're like. But when we think about brand building, we need to think about 12, 18, 24 months on, because what you do now will affect what you do then. And then, yeah, finally, think about the audience, right? Think about what they want to see. Put yourself in their shoes. What would get them to engage, to tag a
yeah,
colleague, to share a post? Um, you know, Even if they don't know who you are, because that's a huge point of the whole thing, right? Not everyone's going to know you, as we've already said, but you want to start creating content that anyone could relate to.
yeah. I think these are some really good tips, and I think actually so much of the time we do make it about us. And the other thing that I hear from SDRs is like we don't have anything to post. So what they end up defaulting to is posting company news, right? So, our company has partnered with company X. How great. And actually, that's not really interesting to you're not really explaining the why.
Now,
So I think that those are some really good actionable tips. And I think, the other thing, and we talked about this a bit with Jack when we had Jack on, which was we're moving away from this activity-based model, and we're moving toward being, it's really important to be seen as a trusted advisor, to nurture. And so I think the trends that we're seeing is we are shifting away from pure activity in an SDR world.
Mm.
Number of dials, number of emails, automation at scale, all those sort of, mass things that I think worked a couple of years ago. As you think about that shift away from pure activity, how do you think SDR managers can shift their mindset and their management style to what they train on and how they reward their teams?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the days of X amount of dials or X amount of emails sent have kind of long gone. So I think it should be more about celebrating growth and seeing, especially we talked there about the SDR role, as being a role where you're meant to get things wrong, right? And I say that to every SDR that starts at Salesloft, because often, especially new SDRs, and this was me, I've got to get everything right from day one. I've got to get everything right from day one. Whatever happens, I can't put a foot wrong. But if you switch that mindset up and going, well, actually, no, I'm probably going to be in this role for 12 months, maybe 18 months, 2 years if I really need it, and I'm going to use that time to grow. And I think that if we celebrate growth and learning rather than, emails sent or metrics, that for me feels like the future. I think it would also make the role more appealing, right?
Mm.
Do you want to be in a role where actually when you come out of it, you'll be transformed, and we're going to help you to do that. You'll be a different version of yourself than you were when you joined, and your career will develop. I mean, the word develop, right? It's in the it's in the job title, so let's make it part of the role.
I love that, celebrating growth and learning. How do you think managers shift to that objectively, right? Because you're not always going to have a team of 100% of people who are necessarily the right fit for the role, or who are hitting targets. What does that practically look like from a target perspective, and from a training perspective as well?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The metric of, especially with SDRs, meetings booked, that's never going to go away. The metric of closed business as a result of your work, also it's a great indicator of success and growth. But I also think it's about checking in with the team and, you know, tracking things like confidence. Like I train a lot of salespeople now, especially this year. I've been doing more of it, right? And what I often find is that confidence, and whether this is building a brand or whether this is selling in general, is a huge part of it. And it's not something I think that we actually track and measure. Now, of
Yeah.
course, without making this a Salesloft advert, there are ways to do that with sales engagement to kind of measure conversations, take metrics and put them all together to better understand how a seller is performing rather than just they did this amount of activity. But I think that's a huge part of it, right? Listen back to calls, review them with your team, right? Celebrate the moments where, oh, you sounded fantastic there. There was no stutter. There was no essence in your voice of fear, maybe where you were at six months ago. I think it's those kind of things that we also need to look at tracking.
I think that's such a good point. And I know it's one of the kind of more subjective qualities we have a look at. But one of the metrics that I used to track was meaningful conversations.
Mm.
And to me, a meaningful conversation isn't, did you get a meeting? A meaningful conversation is potentially an outcome of asking those difficult questions. So if someone says, but we've already got a solution in place, like to your point, it's having the confidence to drill down into that. Now, if I was an SDR in month one, I might not have the confidence to do that. And you do need that confidence to ask the difficult questions. So I always found that meaningful conversations was an interesting metric to track, because it was just coming away from the conversation with more information than you started with. So I think what you said there is really spot on. You talked a little bit about training a lot of reps on social selling. How did people go from, zero pipeline generated to booking meetings and generating pipeline? What are some of the success stories that you've seen there?
Yeah, I mean, we almost touched on it with your previous question. You know, when a lot of salespeople will say, "Well, I don't know what to post," or I'm not given anything to post." My reaction to that is always, "Well, what's your outbound messaging, right? What are you emailing people about? What are you leaving voicemails about, right? What are you talking about?" And sellers will say, "Well, I outline problems that maybe the ICP could be going through, and then I talk about how we could fix it." And I'm like, well, there's your content, right? Bring that story to life on LinkedIn. Take the problems that you solve for and tell that story. Now, what that's going to help with is it's going to align your messaging. Okay. So I get an email from an SDR and it tells me all the great things they can do, right? Maybe I look at their LinkedIn profile because they've always sent me a message as well. So I'll look at that. And actually, if I don't see alignment in those two messages, I think to myself, is it even a real person? Right? Is it a robot? Is it automated? Or this person doesn't care enough about what they have to offer, because I don't see any evidence on social about the things that they're telling me they can do in my inbox. So I talk a lot about aligning that messaging. And that's a great way to start. You know, you talked about pipeline there. I mean, don't get me wrong, it might not give you instant pipeline, but it might just get you a meeting booked that might have not necessarily happened, right? It might have fallen through the cracks. But actually just being really proactive and being a voice for the problem that you solve for, that's half the battle, right? It's just showing prospects that, oh, okay, this is an actual person, number
Yeah.
one, but also an interesting person who seems to have an opinion on the problem they solve for. And I see
Yeah.
content about that. Like, we can't rely anymore. That a moment's gone for just, I send some emails and I make
Yeah.
some calls and I kind of hope for the best. We have to be ambassadors for the problem. And I don't say solution, because a lot of people on LinkedIn are ambassadors for their solution, right? And how amazing they are. Actually, you want to be an ambassador for the problem and a real voice for the pain points of your ICP, because it's that kind of content that will justify your outreach.
I love that. I've just scribbled that down, about being ambassadors for the problem, because as you said that, it made me think that so much of the time sellers will try and make their software the solution.
Yeah.
And it's trying to fit this kind of square peg in a round hole. And I've walked away from opportunities before where I've said, actually, I don't think we're the best fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it comes back to your earlier point about confidence. But I think what you said there, the bit that I scribbled down, was kind of the voice of the pain points, of like understanding the challenges of your persona and having the empathy, which is something that every guest we've had on is talking about, how that's such an important trait,
Mm-hmm.
is having the empathy to actually have a conversation about that and have the right conversation about it. But there was something else. There was another word that you said, that struck a chord with me, which was instant, right? And I think this year has been a lot of resetting of expectations with sales leaders, VPs of sales, CRAs, and even CEOs that I speak to as well, of instant results.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we're seeing that change in marketing, with a lot of organizations that are moving from lead gen to demand gen. And suddenly, we're moving away from the conversation of reps saying, where are my MQLs? Where is the list of people that attended the webinar and can I call them? And actually not getting instant results from everything. And Jack shared some examples of, people that he had prospected last year that he's now finally engaged this year. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're seeing a lot of delayed results for that, and I think we're starting to see metrics change and training change and evolve,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a which I think is positive.
Mm.
I had a stat on a podcast last week that blew my mind. It was actually Jeremy Donovan's stat, but he said outbound is 4 times harder in this year than it was 4 years ago.
Mm.
Crazy.
Mm.
So he's saying that if in 2019 you needed to make 100 calls, today you need to make 400 calls to get the same result. Mind blowing.
Yeah. And I think it stresses the importance of things like multi-channel, right? Things
Yeah.
like social selling. It's setting yourself up for success in the best way possible because it is so tough out
Yeah.
there. And I wrote about this on LinkedIn earlier, right? There is no better time to start, as you said, and also like the excuse of, oh well, I don't know if it's kind of right for me, or maybe I don't know, video content on the platform. Like, we have to get rid of that now because it's so
Yeah.
difficult, and you can't just be a faceless salesperson who does a bit of activity. You need to push yourself
Yeah.
to the forefront of the industry that you sell into. Now that might sound a little bit I just heard myself, right? I put myself into the shoes of a new seller. That might sound a bit like, well, how can I what are you talking about? How can I possibly do that? But what I often remind people that I work with and people that I train is that I very much let myself into the party when we talk about B2B sales and kind of LinkedIn, right? There was a party already happening with a lot of big players, and I was just some SDR, no voice, no name, no one's kind of heard of him. But through consistency and brand building and really putting some effort into being a voice for the problem, and having an opinion in the industry, and hopefully making people laugh along the way, I kind of put myself into that, and I hate the word influencer world, right? So what I like to remind people is that no matter what role you're in, or your background, or your silly accent, or your bald head, or whatever your hang up might be, you can still have a voice on the platform, and there is a place for you at the party. And I think it's so important to remember.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful. And I think a good message to people who are on the fence about starting.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I think I used to train a lot of SDRs, and the feedback I used to hear is I tried and I didn't get very good engagement. Right, I
Yeah.
wasn't getting any likes. So it didn't really work. They
So I
posted a few.
stopped. That's what everyone said. So I stopped and never did it again.
Yeah. So how would you deal with that if you were training someone who said that? I mean, it's not overnight results, so you might not get any likes or many likes in your first, second, third post. But how would you deal with that?
Well, we mentioned there looking at kind of 12, 18 months, 24 months in advance, right? Nobody signs up to the gym for 2 years and after 2 weeks kind of looks down and goes, oh, it's not quite what I was looking for, so I'm not gonna go anymore, right? You have to think about the future state. And
Yeah,
again, use building a brand as an opportunity to learn and develop and grow, and it's a great time to do that as an SDR. Experiment with different types of content, right? My earlier content was terrible, looking straight down the lens and trying to teach people how to sell. I just did what everyone else was doing at the time, and as you said, nobody likes it and it bombs. But the difference between myself and maybe other sellers who kind of dropped off, as you said there, I didn't do that again, is I very much made a commitment to doing it every week. I made a public announcement. I'm going to make one video every week, and I'm going to see what happens. And I held myself accountable to that, right? Even the videos that bombed or the videos that didn't do very well, each week I came back, tried to learn from the week before. So I think it's so important to, not beat yourself up if it doesn't do very well, because 2 years from now you'll thank yourself for the mistakes that you made
Yeah.
2 years ago.
I think that's really spot on, because I think actually if you look at what makes up a good seller, it's that accountability you just talked about, it's that drive, it's that consistency, it's that kind of goal orientated mindset. So the top SDRs, AEs, probably have these innate qualities in them anyway, and it's actually just about, I think the first post is always the hardest.
First is the worst. That's what they say. It's going to be absolutely terrible. But your first swimming lesson, it doesn't go very well, does it? You never come home and think, oh, I really nailed that. I did a few laps. No, of course you didn't. You almost drowned. But what you do is you go back next week and you try and get a little bit better. So I think it's just so important to, and go back to the swimming analogy, jump in at the deep end, right?
Yeah.
And not be afraid. Oh, it looks a bit silly. It sounds a bit silly. If someone walked past you on your first swimming lesson, is that person swimming? No, absolutely not. But maybe they will be in the future if they stick with it,
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So shifting gears slightly, my sales coach launched a fantastic survey, very insightful survey a few weeks ago. And one of the takeaways I had was actually, sadly, a lot of reps are feeling unfulfilled in their roles. And I've been an SDR, you've been an SDR. I think there's a lot of, I really enjoyed it. And there is potential for SDRs to have fun for this role. And I know you've been in it before and you were not sure whether it was the right role for you. If there are SDRs that are listening to this, what advice would you give them so they could maybe find a bit more enjoyment in the role and be a bit more authentic and be a bit more themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me to hear that stat, because again, one of the hardest jobs in the world, the SDR role, and let's not kid ourselves that it's that it's anything but an absolute slog most of the time. It's relentless and the targets never go away, and you really have to focus and you really have to try every day to be successful. I'm not selling it to anyone who's looking at the role, am I? But also it can be so rewarding, and we talked about growth and we talked about learning. It can be so rewarding because there is no better feeling than thriving in the role, and I really do genuinely believe that. If you and everyone talks about that penny drop moment in the role, right? Once you get that penny drop moment and things start working and clicking, you feel unstoppable, right? It's really exciting. A big thing for me is, bringing in some personality. Now, there's so many dull sales messages, and I'll receive them all the time. I'm sure you will as well, Shabri. We see that a lot. Very, very dull messaging. Or even if someone calls you up, they sound like they would rather be at home or doing anything else, right? So a big tip from me is always, look, how can you bring some personality into the role? How can you be the best call someone received today, the most interesting email someone received, right? The funniest piece of content that they've seen, right? All those things. How do you kind of set yourself up to really be the best you can? I think it's about experimenting, right? Having fun within the role, so important. If you're having fun when you're doing your outreach, that will come across. If you sound terrified, if you sound like you want to hit target, if you sound like you've got a huge sales target to hit, and you can kind of hear it in the voice, right? Because please, I really need this. Actually, if you can just relax and be yourself and not worry too much about the outcome, it's going to help you massively. I also think, and I heard this one recently, it's about It's about loving the solution and loving the problem that you solve for.